And so, after these engaging conversation ensue from this young panel, you would have to go through lot many sleepless hours. So on. No. I have planned it like this. I'll give a brief introduction, maybe in 2 to 3 minutes, 3-4 minutes, about the topic of discussion today, and then we'll go back to the panel. We all are aware that in the past 100 years or so, the status of women in the society, the perception about women, their experiences and living have gone a sea change. No doubt, there has been substantial contribution from the creative fields in shaping up the feminine world that we come across today. The status of women in the society, their plight, their deliverance have always been portrayed through literature, but it became more convincing when women authors started telling the stories and experiences of women. Though years back, women had a very limited role in literature, they have been portrayed as pious, obedient, and submissive, confined to the four walls of the home. But since time immemorial, women cried for freedom. In Teri Gatha, written around 600 BC, poet Sumangala Mata rejoiced freedom while leaving home and being converted to a Buddhist monk. It is her poem probably that a woman will set free. Then through ages, from among the Sangam poets, Arundhati would be knowing from history, around 100 BC to 250 AD, we find women poets revolting against the suffering of women and raised their voices in their poems, poetry being the only medium of literary expression prevalent that time. From Bhakti movement saga of poets, Marathi poet Bahina Bai raised her voice against denial of knowledge to women in her poem, The Fate of Being Born a Woman. Poet Mirabai denounced the world and sought merger in Lord Krishna in her poems. The much discussed Tamil poet Muthu Palani, her period is 1730 to 1790. She faced a lot of controversy because she had written about the claim of a woman to pleasure through her series of poems Radhika Santwana. These are description of love and longing and lust of Sri Radha for Sri Krishna. Around that time, all over the country, poets, male poets, have been rampantly writing about love and longing between Radha and Krishna, and many of them have depicted Radha's longing for Krishna. In our own language, that is in Odia language, we have our Kavi Samrat Upendra Bhanja and Kavi Sunja Baladev Ratha, who both of them are very favorite poets of mine and so must be of yours also. And they have written beautiful, nice poetry on the longing of Radha for Krishna. But lo and behold, because she was a woman, Muthu Palani, in 1730 to 90, because of her writing about longing of a woman, that too again in the form of Radha, she had to face ostracism from the society. Well, I would just like to tell you what all we have done so far about compiling women writing in India. In a country like ours, it is not an easy task to trace the age-old writings by women. I believe some such attempts to a great extent have been done by Suji Tharu and K. Lalitha in their maiden attempts to compile the women writing in India in 2 volumes. They have expressed, quote, "We began work on these volumes with the premise that critical assumptions, historical circumstances and ideologies generally have been hostile to women's literary production and have crippled our ability to read and appreciate their work," unquote. Friends, we just had a very engaging discussion regarding Sarala Devi. Of course, a distinction in women writing has been felt with the impact of Western education and involvement in freedom movement. And those poems are prose written towards the end of 19th century and in the beginning of 20th century have carried the mark. Our own Sarala Devi, regarding whom there has been such an engaging conversation and you all have heard that. She, in 1913, and just for the sake of repetition, I am telling you, in her much acclaimed work, The Demands of Women, has told that the body of a woman is hers, and it is she who decides what to do with it at that point of time. But it is also marked that most of the women writers around that time dwelt on female aesthetic, where female experience and its process held mystic implications, projecting both transcendental and self-destructive vulnerability. Well, women writing entered a new stage in 1960s and 70s. Women writers started to construct female experiences using previously taboo language and situations. Anger, love, and rebellion are but accepted as sources of female creative power. Still later, education and awareness inculcated sense of individuality amongst women and aroused a keen interest in their experiences and rights. Women writing in India has metamorphosed with time, maintaining proportion with historical and cultural realities, levels of consciousness, perceptions, and actions of individual women writers and women in general. Yet in recent times, in past 20 years, women writers, of which the writers like Arundhati, Pooja and Nandini are a subset, and I believe that I too belong there, have been narrating women's experiences in a very, very different and distinct tone, imbibed with sharpness of feelings, suffusing their work with quaint creativity, which probably rarely happened in creative field before. With this short introduction, I don't know whether it was required or not. However, I would now draw your attention to the panel here. Arundhati has already been introduced to you. You had just heard her in the earlier session. And Arundhati has been writing poetry for quite some time. I have read few of your poems which have been available to me. I would like you to tell us, how have you perceived emancipation of women through writing by women writers in the country?
You know, that is such an enormous question that I'm trying to think of how to approach it.
But I'm very sorry.
No, you're absolutely right.
I'll be giving you 3 minutes for that.
Absolutely. That is the nature of, should I say of literary festivals? No, it's the nature of the kind of conversations we are all compelled to have today. It has to be continued later. Let me say this, that as a writer who found herself writing in the later part of the 20th century and the early 21st, I realized fairly early that I was not squeamish about the term woman poet. And I know many of my other female contemporaries were. I think I made my peace with that term because I see it as a possible way of, a possible sight line, a way of reading a particular literature. But as long as that is a constituency and not a ghetto, I'm comfortable. As long as it remains that. As soon as it becomes ghettoized, I think many women writers, many women artists feel uncomfortable because eventually we want to be taken seriously because of merit rather than any other variable. But we also know that merit is determined by a whole host of biases. So our ideas of merit have to constantly be re-examined. That's one possible answer, but let me also say, in continuation of what we were talking about in the previous session, that I'm not uncomfortable with the term feminist, only insofar as feminism suggests, as it does to me, a way of questioning the many ways in which gender is constructed. And as a tool, as an instrument of questioning, it can be a tremendous resource. I'm comfortable seeing it as a journey rather than a destination, because I haven't yet figured out what it is to be woman, any more than I've figured out what it is to be human. I'm still searching, I'm still exploring.
Very good, Arundhati. I also have often wondered, why should I be called a woman writer? As you have told that I have slowly come to terms with the word, because as I progressed, I understand that maybe probably because of the feminine imagination that I or authors like me are putting into their work, that they call us women writers, because they have to put us somewhere and we have also put us there. Well, very well said, Arundhati. I would like to ask Nandini the same question. And Nandini is a girl from the country, but yesterday I think your book of yours got launched. That was Sita, a poem. We'll come to that later. And I would ask you to answer the same question. How have you perceived emancipation of women through writing by women writers?
Thank you. It's a very important question, and in fact, the session itself, the previous session, that created the mood for this session, and I would thank Arundhati for putting all those important points across, so that it was food for thought for all of us. That we come and question ourselves: what am I doing here? How do people perceive a woman poet writing in English, and why so many adjectives for me? There was an interview for some TV channel where a fellow gentleman, he asked me, ma'am, you have been writing poetry for quite some time. You are from Odisha, you write in English. Being Odia, writing in English, you are an Indian woman poet writing in English. So many adjectives were used for me. I would prefer to be called a poet rather than so many things, because there is and there should be a universal approach in my writing. In order to answer to your very important question, I would go from my micro world to the macro world. First, I will talk about myself and how I started writing poetry. Coming from rural Odisha, from a small hilly town, it's a tribal district, Fulwani district, and now in Delhi, an empowered woman, a professor of English at Indira Gandhi National Open University, which is world's largest university in terms of students intake. We have 8.85 million students, we teach them, we empower them, and I come from a rural village in Odisha. My journey as an individual, as a woman, as a poet, as a creative writer, as a researcher, and as a teacher. Well, my first poetry collection, The Other Voice, was published during my early 20s. And a lot of feministic poems were there. When I read those poems, I revisit my writing now, I feel strange. How come I wrote these kind of poems where, such protest was there? Women's literature was protest literature at one point of time. But slowly, as a woman, I have grown and I have seen all women poets of my contemporaries, they have also grown, and now we question ourselves. As Arundhati pointed out, that we have to question ourselves, we have to do analysis, interpretation, and we have to stand in the historiography of world literature, not only women's literature. So in my first poetry collection, The Other Voice, which I wanted to title as The Opposite Sex, but somebody told me that the opposite sex, it sounds very, very feministic. But anyway, that came from a title poem, The Opposite Sex, which was written in a 1-minute poetry competition, which was an international poetry competition. Within 1 minute, write down why do you call yourself woman the opposite sex. And then that poem got the first prize in that competition somehow, and I thought my first poetry collection should be titled like that. But somehow I did title that as The Other Voice. And then the second poetry collection was The Silence. Again, so many feministic poems were there. But when I started writing my third poetry collection in 2009 at a much mature age, I wanted to be gender neutral. I wanted to stand for humanity. I wanted to be a poet, not a woman poet, and not just a poet who is talking about women. Because, we talk about the universal issues of writing. and the universal issues of humanity. Women's literature is one of the most misrepresented genres. A lot of people consider it as like the word feminism itself creates a debate, creates a question among us. Is it about fighting for the rights of women? No woman can fight for the rights of the other woman. One has to fight for yourself. One has to fight for himself or herself. You have to bear your own cross. Yeah, but as an empowered woman, my role comes where I can support a woman. For example, my fourth poetry collection was Sukama and Other Poems. Sukama was a tribal woman who was my domestic help at my parents' place, and she was a tribal woman who never knew any Odia. She was a Kont woman, knowing Kui language, with a tattooed face, vertical, horizontal tattoos she had on her face, and we literally grew up on her lap without ever knowing the language that she speaks. She speaks Kui and we speak Odia and English. But we grew up in her lap. So my next poetry collection was Sukama and Other Poems, where I talked about the tribal woman who was the maker of us. We grew up with her. We were elite, educated, empowered women because of a tribal Kont Dalit woman. So that collection was my folklore. Sukama was my folklore. The person who invited us to the dais, she introduced me as a folklorist. Well, I'm happy to be one. If a folklorist means somebody who talks about a way of life, the marginalized. I being the empowered, if I facilitate the marginalized to come to the forefront, then there lies my femininity. And then the next collection was, Silver Poems on My Lips. It was a very happy collection where all poems of happy women, empowered women, not only women, humanity, discussion about globalization, livestock, environment, girl child, senior citizens, political issues, social issues, economic issues, all the issues that concern humanity today were there in that collection, Silver Poems on My Lips. And yesterday the book which was launched here, Sita, a Poem. As she asked me, Sita, a Poem is the deconstruction of the character of Ramayana, Sita. I have placed Sita vis-a-vis all women, all contemporary women. My Sita is not a brooding, crying, complaining woman who has been deserted by Ram. Rather, she is a progressive, contemporary, modern, optimistic woman who has accepted life as it has come her way. She is the original ecofeminist, if I may. Ecofeminism is a new literary theory. I am working a lot on that, and we are introducing some courses in my university on ecofeminism from the Department of Gender Studies, where we talk about how ecology and womanhood can come together. Who understands more than women about livestock, about preservation, about helping humanity, about life, love, happiness? Who understands more than women? Women is the creator. So ecofeminism connects women with ecology. In this context, I remember I come from Udaygiri, a small hilly town in Odisha, where there is a place called Samanvita, where it's a place of all women workers. They go, tribal women, they work, they earn money, they are empowered. They are no more beaten up by their husbands at home, and our kind of women who are empowered, who are educated, we try to help them out through that Samanvita. And in my poetry collection, Sukama and Other Poems, I have a couple of mention of that place, and also practically I try to help them out. Now from here I'll be going to my native place and I would be meeting those people. So this is how the responsibility of a poet. A poet should not be only juggling with words. Rather, we should perform our duty to the society. If I am a woman poet, then I should be also in a position to understand people around, to talk about humanity. This is my response.
Thank you, Nandini. So from narrating about protests about against the plight of women, now we have started deconstructing the age-old taboos about the perception of women, and we have started narrating the experiences of women. Nandini says that women writers, or for that matter poets, have a social responsibility to awaken the society against the plight, especially when happened against the women. Anyways, we'll come to Preeti. Preeti is a very, Pooja is a very young writer, hails from Raipur, and she has written a novel, and Maya, and that has got released today? Yeah, today, and she has written few poems. And what is your experience about emancipation of women through literature?
The topic is very interesting, the role of a woman throughout the ages of literature. The role of woman is constantly questioned in this world. The role of woman, the status of woman in this world, and she has struggled to find her place in this world. Female writers have provided a great landmark for women who did not have any place in this society, like Sarojini Naidu, a greatest poet. She opened the door of education for girls, where girls were not allowed to impart knowledge and education, where women did not have any right in the family, but they had to devote their everything to the family, where women were not allowed to give their decisions, their opinions. They were just considered in our oldest ancient period. Women were just considered as a sexual object, nothing more than that. They were not considered as an individual. But today, women are having an identity. They are the equal earners working outside equally as men. Literature has provided a window into the lives and thoughts of women in a fictitious form. Literature is the one which has opened a great windows and doors for the upliftment of women. Women are the most untapped reservoirs of talent in this world. So I must say that women should appreciate her uniqueness. She should understand her uniqueness, that she is one of the most unique human in this world. And we should also appreciate her uniqueness and identity. She wears different masks in front of different people, but not being honest to herself. So it's important, and the literature women writers are the one who have provided a great deal and great status to the women. That's what I want to say.
Thank you, Pooja.
I have written one Hindi poem for women.
I'll go to that later in the other round. So through literature, women writers have opened a window which was hitherto closed for a long time. I believe that the watershed happened probably when women authors started writing about their experiences, their feelings. Before it was male authors, men who have been on feelings of women or the treatment of women or whatever. So, do you agree with that, Arundhati? And what do you think that? I think that when we started writing, women started writing about their experiences, narrating their experiences in their own words. Probably, it is again. I might be dividing literature to certain sects, the way certain part of section of our writers don't mind me saying that Dalit writers say that when we write on Dalits, then we write it better than anybody else. Could be so. Literature or writing comes from a heartfelt thing and something you have endured, experienced very deeply inside you. So I believe that the watershed probably came when women have come forward to write about their own experiences and portray that through literature. What is your view about that?
There's certainly a great deal to be said about a lived experience. I would be a little wary of talking about this as a journey from the personal to the universal, or as a journey from the gender-specific to a kind of gender-neutral ideal. For me, the ideal is not gender-neutral. The ideal is not transcendence. And in this, I've particularly drawn inspiration from many of the poets whom we call today the Bhakti poets of the subcontinent. They are not necessarily telling you that you are imprisoned by an identity and that biology is destiny, which is what many of us as women writers would be deeply uncomfortable with. But they are in fact saying that the body, with its sexuality, can be a tremendous instrument of knowing. It can be a site of wisdom. So there is, for instance, and those are the poets I'd really like to quote, from whom I've really felt empowered, poets who've empowered me in many ways. One of them is Akka Mahadevi, the 12th century Kannada woman mystic, who says, and this is an early example of a particular kind of tone that today we consider to be rebellion. She says, take these husbands who die and decay and feed them to your kitchen fires. Give me the imperishable one. So that's one particular kind of rage poem, but there are others. There's Soirabai, who is a Dalit woman mystic of Maharashtra, who says, if menstrual blood makes me impure, show me who was not born of that blood. So in these ways, she sounds really like the kind of voice we need to hear today more than ever. And it's these women who also remind us that the notion of the female body was not necessarily talked of only in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Women were talking about it in their own ways, even earlier. I think these are the voices we need to reclaim for ourselves. And I'm also interested in those male poets who, when they adopted a female persona, spoke very differently. So if there is time, there is one particular poem that I'd like to share, which is a poem by Annamacharya. This is later on, only if there's time. He's a 15th century Telugu Bhakti poet. And when Annamacharya writes as a man, as a male seeker, the tone is anguished, conflicted, imploring, all of that. When he writes as a woman seeker, the tone is very different. This is not just a regular female devotee. This is the goddess herself. So when the goddess speaks to God, the tone is confident, sensual, provocative. It's a very different tone. I think this also tells us about the many ways in which gender can be created and dismantled at will.
Yeah, absolutely, Arundhati. I just mentioned our own Kavi Surya Baladeva Ratha. He is my favorite. I'm sure he would be the favorite of 90% of audience here. And such beautiful verses he has written about Radhika's feelings and longings for Krishna. One of the very important poems I would have loved to recite again, but for the time I am not doing it. Kihe lare kahi tanu hai bharatire. Many of us have known this. That's a very beautiful poem, and naturally, as we progress now that we all have been writing for some time and we have experienced that writing is genderless, and though we talk about women writing, I don't think when I start writing, or you do, we don't think that I'm either a man or a woman who is writing.
Let me just add this personally. I think there are some poems in which I would write in a way that I implicate gender overtly. In others, I may not implicate it overtly, but that doesn't mean I cease to be a woman when I do that.
As I said, that is a feminine imagination that pushes us to write the way we do. That is it.
I just want to say the distinction that I made earlier between ghetto and constituency is my way of also saying that an identity, when it is a means of exploration, is significant. When it becomes a matter of cozy club membership, it's a problem.
No. And now that, we have poets here, and poets speak through their poems rather than words, and poems speak better than the words. So Pooja and Preeti are all both beautiful names. I'm sorry, Pooja, I have been doing this mistake. And Pooja has written a poem in Hindi for this occasion. I would like her to recite one, and then I'll request.
Yeah, as we are discussing here for the role of a woman throughout the ages of literature. So I have tried to portray the image of a woman through this few lines of my Hindi poetry. अनगिनत रूप है तेरे इस धरती पर, हर रूप में है सर्वगुण संपन्न मगर, तारीफ करूं तेरी या उस रब की जिसने तुझे बनाया, सारी कायनात में शीतल तेरे आंचल की छाया। माँ बनी तो जीवन के कांटों से बचाया, पत्नी बनी तो जीवन को फूलों से सजाया। क्यों हमेशा हर किसी ने कुलदीपक की आस लगाई, जननी की पैदाइश पे ये दुनिया हमेशा लज जाई। चंदा की चांदनी, सूरज की रोशनी, औरत के बिना सारी सृष्टि है सूनी। आसमान में जगह नहीं तो क्या धरती तो अपनी है, जननी की कोख से उपजी यह काया धरती में ही समा जानी है। थैंक यू।
Nandini,
Before I read one of my poems aside, which I had written from in my first poetry collection, The Other Voice, I would just mention a couple of things. Last year I edited an anthology of Indian women poets writing in English. The title was Subarna Rekha. And I have taken so many Indian women poets writing in English, and I am going to do the next volume of Subarna Rekha in near future, so that I can include more number of poets. And I saw that the poems, the kind of poems I received from the women poets were so very enormous, and so many varieties of themes women have covered. I have to think about the alternative modernities that women poets employ these days while writing poetry. Women's literature has gone far beyond protest literature. Rather, it has become universal, as I pointed out when I discussed about it. In fact, the time is gone when women are no more talked as the goddess or the demoness. Now we are talking about the real women like us. We are talking about Nandinis. We are talking about the women who are real flesh and blood. So with that, I would read one of my very early poems. The title of the poem is Aside. Aside is a Shakespearean stage technique where one character speaks on the stage in the presence of another character, but the other person cannot hear him. He cannot know what he is telling, but the audiences can connect to the speaker. So this is how here the woman personage, she is speaking something about herself which the person standing beside her is not able to realize, but she is sending this message to the whole world. So the title of the poem is Aside. In the morning, I am a daughter-in-law, serving hot tea, stitching broken buttons, cleaning, cooking, frying, stirring, wiping my son's nose, sometimes slapping him when the ever-complaining man watches me. I am wife. In the day, I am a college teacher, facing young, obsessed girls and boys, trying hard to look professional, wearing the mask of an official fool. Again in the afternoon, I am a mother, loving, kissing, playing, caring, rearing, hearing the daily saga of phone bills, market prices, taxes, policies, news bulletins, chiding the maid for chopping vegetables rather small or the onions in the wrong side. In the evening, I am the showpiece, a perfect Christmas bud, bargaining, wearing a matching lipstick, thinking of the evening menu, relising but inexpensive, smiling, smiling, ever smiling behind a mysterious face, knowing every detail of mornings, afternoons, never-ending nights. Yes, in the night, till he smiles proud and sleeps. And then I drag the world to my feet, a dreamer that I am. I reach the unreached, swim in the world of fancy, whence my feminine thirst. I am every woman, dribbling, pouring desire to the feminine mannequin. In the morning, I am a daughter-in-law, wife, mother, researcher, mute, contented. I am the goddess who knows what are the things to happen and what not, since time has plowed scars on my virgin mud.
thank you, Nandini. Let us listen from Arundhati.
Let me ask the audience what kind of poem they would like. Would you like a rage poem? Would you like a love poem? What would you like?
It seems she's full of poems. She doesn't have anything in writing, and she's poetry herself. So let her.
Have you got any poem in regard to emancipation?
Okay.
Let me choose a particular poem that is not about gender alone. I think our problem often is the fact that identities are imposed on us. The fact that we are sometimes surrounded by voices that tell us how to belong. Whether it's voices that tell us how to be woman, or voices that tell us how to be post-colonial, or voices that tell us how to be modern, or voices that tell us how to be traditional. So this is addressed to all those voices that tell us that there are recipes for belonging. So this is a poem as much for men as for women. This is called To the Welsh Critic Who Doesn't Find Me Identifiably Indian, because there are lots of prescriptions for Indianness. A rage poem, just bear with. I'm not always this angry. You believe you know me, wide-eyed Inglet type, from a sun-scalded colony, reading my Keats, or is it yours? While my country detonates on your television screen. You imagine you've cracked my deepest fantasy. Oh, to be in an Edwardian vicarage, living out my dharma with every sip of dandelion tea and dreams of the weekend jumble sale. You may have a point. I know nothing about silly mid-offs. I stammer through my Tamil, and I long for a nirvana that is hermetic, odor-free, bottled in Switzerland, money back guaranteed. This business about language, how much of it is mine, how much yours, how much from the mind, how much from the gut, how much is too little, how much too much, how much from the salon, how much from the slum, how I say verisimilitude, how I say Brahadaranyaka, how I say Varaparam, it's all yours to measure. The pathology of my breath, the halitosis of gender, my homogenized plosives, about as rustic as a mouth-freshened global village. Arbiter of identity, remake me as you will. Write me a new alphabet of danger, a new patois to match the chola bronze of my skin. Teach me how to come of age in a literature you've bark-scratched into scripture. Smear my consonants with cow dung and turmeric and godhuli. Pity me, sweating, rancid on the other side of the counter. Stamp my papers. Lease me a new anxiety. Grant me a visa to the country of my birth. Teach me how to belong the way you do on every page of world history.
Thank you, Arundhati. I have rarely met a poet who could recite her long poem like this from her own mind. I think that you all agree with that. And before ending the session, I'm also tempted to read a small poem of mine to you. I would have loved to read it in Odia, but because of the panel here and let me see. And I think Hindi will do also because two of the poems have been rendered in English, and I have got this poem has been translated into English also by Jayant Mahapatra, but because the title is Sari, so I would like to either read it in Odia or in Hindi, and Odia I'll definitely read it to you sometime. Sari. 5.5 मीटर की मर्यादा से मैंने खुद को लपेट लिया है और अपनी गरिमा में खुद उलझ रही हूँ। 5.5 मीटर की मर्यादा से मैंने खुद को लपेट लिया है और अपनी गरिमा में खुद उलझ रही हूँ। याद नहीं कभी यह मर्यादा किसी से हाथ पसार कर मांगा था। याद नहीं कभी यह मर्यादा किसी से हाथ पसार कर मांगी थी या जबरन खींच लाई थी या किसी की लाल आंखों का इशारा था या था सपनों में खोए उस नौजवान का घबराया सा पहला उपहार। अपने पहनावे की महिमा बखान रही थी मेरी दूसरी बहनें। अपने पहनावे की महिमा बखान रही थी मेरी दूसरी बहनें अपने मन मुताबिक सुविधा, सरल, स्वच्छंद ऐसे कुछ शब्दों की ज्यामिति। पर मैं चुप थी। कैसे समझाती उन्हें कि मेरा परिधान आध्यात्मिक है। रात को घर लौटकर नाप नूप कर उस साड़ी के कई टुकड़े किए और हर टुकड़े को मंत्र पढ़ कर उड़ा दिया। रात को घर लौटकर नाप नूप कर उस साड़ी के कई टुकड़े किए और हर टुकड़े को मंत्र पढ़ कर उड़ा दिया। एक टुकड़ा उस कबाड़ा बटोरने वाली औरत के फटे घाघरे में पायबंद लगाने के लिए, एक बलात्कार के बाद गांव की अमराई में फेंके गए नंगे शव को ढकने के लिए, एक बड़े अस्पताल के वंश वार्ड में दहेज न लाने वाली नई नवेली के लिए रखे गए 10 नंबर बेड की चादर बनाने को, आखिरी टुकड़ा 5 सितारा होटल में 5 ग्राहकों को शराब परोसने वाली लड़की के इतनी सी छोटे बख्श बंधन में सिले जाने के लिए। सुबह देखा सारे टुकड़े लौट आए हैं, फिर से जुड़कर मुझे सिर से पांवों तक ढकने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। मेरे पेट, छाती और पीठ का तब भी कुछ हिस्सा दिख रहा है। इतनी लंबी साड़ी भी जिसे छिपाने को कम पड़ रही है, 5 more minutes, friends. As we have discussed and seen, with every form of Indian literature, there emerged many kinds of evolution of womanhood. After observing varieties of impacts over the last 60 years, dealing with arrays of themes and thoughts, diverse multiple strains of literary expressions have been created by women authors, but every writer tries to convey our thoughts in a personal and distinct way, but in a collective spectrum, they have been successful in creating a chorus, a collective tone, emphasizing the sovereignty of women. I hope you all agree with me. And if Diksha permits of another 5 minutes, I would like to have, I am very strict about time. We have 5 more minutes. We can have, since the audience is, the hall is full, 2 questions to the panelists, not me.
Good afternoon, everybody on the desk, as well as off the desk. Myself, J.P. Mahapatra. The question regarding emancipation and empowerment. Everybody is talking now. This is the current affair, like global warming. So, whether men help emancipates, empowers women, or the vice versa? That's the question.
Have men emancipated women?
Whether men is the chauvinistic male dominating society, in this society, whether men, MEN, helps, emancipates, empowers women, or the vice versa. Thank you.
I think it's, I talked about feminism at the start. I think for me, feminism has always been, as I said, a way of questioning gender, which can be as oppressive to men as it can be to women. I think most men, almost every man that I have known, has talked about the ways in which gender has been oppressive even for him, in different ways. If we are given tools, a kind of archaeology by which we can explore gender, I think it can be as empowering for men as for women. It's a collective journey on which we've all embarked, I like to think.
I would like to respond to as well. No one empowers no one. It's about solidarity. If we want a society which is healthy, then there should be solidarity between men and women. See, look at our Odia literature. Let us just come to our Odia literature. Is there any better feminist than our Fakir Mohan Senapati with his story Revati, who talked at a period about girl child, women's education when women's education was nowhere in the country. Fakir Mohan Senapati talked about it at that point of time. So let's not talk about who empowers whom or who oppresses whom. It's about solidarity between the two genders. That's why now we feminist literary critics were also equally talking about masculinity studies. Masculinity studies is one of the upcoming theories of research and pedagogy which we are introducing in universities. We are teaching students masculinity studies, which is not not a rejoinder to feminism, rather it's complementary to feminism. So it's about equality and solidarity.
To add to that, Sriratha Brahmakantaratha, he very nicely has depicted the longing and love of Sriratha for Krishna. So this is what I hope you got your answer. One more question we can take? Anybody? Anybody from the audience? Yes? Give us the mic.
Hello. Hi, I'm Dharitri, and I was attending Subramanian ma'am's session a while back, and when sir told that the women these days are not writing because they are running after IT jobs and company jobs and whatnot. So I just would like to tell everybody that I'm a teacher at a school, and I am a mad poet and writer. So I just want to thank all of you to come on the stage. But I feel it's very important for women to be put on stage and let them speak. And it took me a really long time to actually own my right to write. So, 2 lines for you. The words are the ones I wrote for you. The best of the words are the ones I wrote for you. And this is second poem, and it could be a little funny one as well. It says, just what I normally do. Just what I normally do every day and daily. While people eat, sleep and poop, I write to you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dharitri. Now we have, the session has come to end.
We will also have 2 books released now. One of course is Maya When Love Becomes an Obsession. The author is here with us, Dr. Pooja Agarwal. I'll request all the panelists to pose with the book, of course. Yeah. Let's hear a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And the next one is A Sip of Twilight. Swastik, yes, yeah, all right. Young Girl collection of poetry, right? Please come on, guys. Well, I'll request the panelists to stay. I call Mr. Thank you so much.